Hello everybody, my name is Raxef, and today's video is inspired by a conversation that I had with a friend of mine a couple days ago in regards to him getting back into the World of Warcraft. Now, I figured I would make a video talking about some of the questions that he asked, as well as a couple of questions that I've been asked by other friends, both who have played the World of Warcraft and quit in previous expansions, and by those who have never touched World of Warcraft a day in their lives. So let's just jump into it. So the way this video is going to go is first I'm going to be covering a couple of topics and questions that have been asked of me by people who have never played World of Warcraft before. And then after that I'm going to be touching on some subjects that people who have experienced World of Warcraft before, they know the general lay of the land, they're just more concerned about some more specific aspects of Legion. And of course there is some crossover there, so I'm going to be handling those sort of crossover questions at the very end. But first, let's talk about some of the things that have been brought up to me by people who have never played World of Warcraft before. First of all, one of the questions that I get asked quite a lot by new players is, what class should I pick? Now, the right answer is, of course, there is no right class to pick. It's all totally up to personal preference and what you want to do in the World of Warcraft. There is a YouTuber out there named Preach Gaming who has done a phenomenal guide for Legion, all about choosing a class. Now, his content does tend to sway more towards the mid to higher tier PvE players, but he does have some really great information that pretty much anybody can take advantage of. So I'm going to link to his video down in the description below. Now, what Blizzard does offer new players is the option to trial a class, and I went ahead and did this for my warrior so I could get a sense of what exactly is offered in this trial. I'm going to have some footage playing behind me. Basically, a trial is really just a very simple demo of the class, and if you kind of like it, then you can go ahead and use your level 100 boost and make that your actual character. However, I would personally warn against this because from my experience, you really don't get a sense of all of the specs of a class. You only get to play one spec, and even then you only go through some of the abilities. Even though it does put you through a scenario, you don't get a sense of what your class is ultimately going to be playing like, particularly in a PvP environment or in a higher end raiding environment. So instead of going the class trial route and using a level 100 boost, I would first look at the guide, which I mentioned before, and then I would level a class from level 1 to level 110. And this is for two reasons. First of all, you get much more time with your abilities and learning how the class plays with the various talents, going through and leveling in the dungeons. You just get a much more enriching experience. And second of all, you get to experience so much more of the story of World of Warcraft. There's a ton of content in Legion, and there's even more that's just in the World of Warcraft itself through all of the past expansions. There's so many characters that you don't ever really meet again that have such rich backstories and storylines. Personally, if it were me starting brand new all over again, I would say don't use your level 100 boost right off the bat. Take the time, level a class up from level 1 to level 110, and really just immerse yourself in the World of Warcraft as deeply as you can. Moving on, I'm going to be covering a couple of the questions that people have asked me who are familiar with the World of Warcraft. Now, the biggest question that I receive most often is, does Legion have the Facebook mission table game that Warlords of Draenor has? It's one of the most disliked things that occurred in Warlords of Draenor, and it has the simplest answer. No, not at all. We do have the mission table in our class order halls, but those missions aren't really mandatory. You do get some really cool rewards out of them, but it's not a big pain to farm the resources if you want to send your followers out on missions. It's all been really streamlined. You don't need to spend as much time putting together the absolute perfect team and getting all your specific followers by visiting your inn. It's all really clean, simple, not stressful. You don't feel like you have to be there morning, noon, and night to constantly send your people out on missions. It's just a much better system that overall it's an enhancement to the game. It's not the central core of the game, which is what it felt like in Warlords of Draenor. Another question that I've been asked is in regards to the amount of content within the expansion. Now, I know that back in Mists of Pandaria and even in Warlords, while there was some cool content there, it really got to the point where people felt like there really isn't anything to do. You know, in Warlords, it felt like some days to play the World of Warcraft was literally to log on and do your garrison missions. In Legion, there is so much content. I mean, there's class-specific content. There's huge amounts of story content, which I'm going to be going into a little bit later. There's amazing raids and dungeons, tons of raids and dungeons, in fact. There's mythic pluses. The PvP system has been revamped, and I really like how PvP has been going, particularly as someone who before wasn't really that fond of PvP. You know, if you were into pet battles, there's been some really great revamps to pet battles and a whole bunch of new pets. I mean, there's so much content to do that even as someone who loves this game, particularly getting really deep into the story and unlocking achievements and trying to do every bit of content as possible, I haven't even done all of the content that you could possibly do in Legion. And I play, you know, I put a decent amount of time into the game. So if you're worried about being starved for content, I absolutely wouldn't worry about it. There's so much that you can do, even if there's just one particular piece of content that you like. For instance, if you just like to PvE, you know, I mentioned the dungeons and the raids and mythic pluses. I mean, mythic pluses have become a really big thing. There's actually a mythic plus invitational that's going on, which I made a video about a short while ago. And you just really feel like Blizzard is taking care of their player base. At least I feel like that they're taking care of their player base. I feel like they're listening to them. With a game as massive as the World of Warcraft, I feel like the developers are being as agile as possible in terms of adding content that the players really like, and that makes for an enjoyable experience for everyone. And finally, moving on, I'm going to be covering a couple of questions that have been asked of me, both by people who have played WoW in the past and who have not. Now, one of the questions that gets asked of me most often is in regards to artifact weapons, specifically artifact power. You know, I tell some friends, oh, I had to get 1.5 billion artifact power to get one minor increase in my weapon, and they're like, wow, 1.5 billion? I can't even imagine what you need to do to farm that much. And one of the great things that I get to tell them is that, well, worry not, you actually get artifact power quite quickly now in patch 7.3, because once you reach 110, your artifact power scales up to everybody else. I believe it is on 52 artifact power. I might be mistaken there. I don't know the exact number, but basically, you know, in the past you had to put in these sort of work orders to increase your artifact knowledge, and your artifact knowledge is what gets what basically scales up how much artifact power you get from rewards for doing quests, world quests, dungeons, raids, PvP, those kinds of things. And now it's really easy to get artifact power. You can go through a looking for raid and get a couple 100 million in a single run. I mean, it's that easy. And for me, the 1.5 billion is to unlock the really higher levels of your artifact weapon that really you don't need to unlock. I'm strictly interested in unlocking them because I'm a competitive PvE player. I want to be upping my damage as much as I possibly can. But for the average player, you know, it really does not take that much to level up your artifact weapon. It may seem daunting when you go through and you see all these trees and you see like, oh gosh, how am I going to be able to amass all of this artifact power? But just naturally leveling up, playing through the quests, doing the natural dungeons, doing the LFR or some PvP, you're going to be able to get your artifact power pretty quickly. Another question I get asked is in regards to gear, and, you know, with the patch being so late in the expansion, will I just simply be left behind by everybody who's had a chance to really get all this great gear from heroic Tomb of Sargeras and normal Tomb of Sargeras. Now that we're going into Argus, I mean, people are going to be getting great gear from that. And the answer to that is actually catching up is going to be quite easy, because not only are you going to be getting gear from your quests, but the item level of gear that is dropping from dungeons has actually been raised in patch 7.3. So, once you start going through your normal and heroic dungeons, you're going to be getting gear quite quickly, up to the point of where you're then going to be able to start participating in LFR, looking for raid, if that's something you're interested in. And then once you start getting into that, you're going to be able to start bridging the gap in, maybe you want to join a pickup group and do a normal raid, maybe normal Tomb of Sargeras or the normal Antorus once that raid comes out. If you're really wanting to start pushing as much as you can to get the gear, there are even the world quests which are offering you higher item levels of gear. For me, to level from level 100 to 110, and keep in mind, I joined back in the Tomb of Sargeras. It was about a week or 2 weeks just before the actual raid Tomb of Sargeras was released. It did not take me that long to level from level 100 to 110. Now, granted, I did have a friend who flew me around the Broken Isles, so they took me to all the world quests to get this gear, but really the world quests are not inaccessible. You can easily get to them through Flight Pass, through ground mounts, and you can get the gear that will help you sort of bridge the gap if you're really looking to get into higher tiers of rating. So overall, I would say don't worry about being left behind, not being able to participate in higher tiers of rating. If you want to get into normal rating or heroic rating or even mythic rating down the line, you're going to be able to catch up through the higher level rewards that you get both in the dungeons and through world quests. Flying is another thing that I'm asked about quite frequently in regards to Legion, because there is a bit of a process to unlock it. You need to get your reputations all the way up to Exalted, you need to explore all of the Broken Isles, you need to finish every single one of the storyline quests, including the quite lengthy Suramar storyline quests, so there is a bit of time that does go into it. However, the good news is, now that we're on Argus, flying isn't allowed on Argus. So if you were kind of on the fence about it and you're not really spending a bunch of time on the Broken Isles, you don't really need to worry, because you get to Argus and all you can really use are ground mounts or flying mounts that don't really fly. So if you want to spend the time to raise your reputations and go through the storyline quests anyways because you like lore, then absolutely take the opportunity to do it and get flying along the way. But you really shouldn't feel that pressured to get flying in Legion, because yes, while people still do some content on the Broken Isles, whether it's getting to Mythic Plus dungeons or getting to certain world quests, it's not an absolutely necessary thing that you do need. And lastly, a question that people ask me about a ton is, has the storyline of Legion progressed too far to jump right in? And right off the bat, I'm going to say Legion has a ton of storyline. You have really rich storyline in all the different questing zones, you have great storyline in your class order halls, and you also have the overarching storyline of the Legion invading Azeroth again, and us needing to fight back. So there is a lot of story to get through. However, if you're not that interested in it, then you don't really need to participate. You can go ahead and start at level 100, go all the way to level 110, and just fly through the quests and go straight on to Argus. But if you're like me and you really, really love the lore of World of Warcraft, you can spend a ton of time picking up every single quest, really delving deep into the factions and all of the new characters, and learning a lot about the Broken Isles, and learning a lot about the history of Azeroth as a whole. If you want to take a sort of middle-of-the-road approach, you can go over to Nobble's channel and watch a couple of lore videos. He does some really amazing content when it comes to the lore in the World of Warcraft. So if you're interested, but you don't really want to spend a whole bunch of time going through all of those quests, then I would recommend really heading over to Nobble's channel. I'm going to link his channel in the description down below. But like I said, there is a ton of story that can be found in Legion, but it does not necessarily mean that you need to complete it all in order to catch up. The premise of Legion is really quite simple. The Legion is invading Azeroth again, and we need to fight back. It's not that complicated at all. Where the complexity comes from is all of the new characters that we find, and all the new factions, and how they interact with each other, and how characters that we've known for a while are growing even more. So that is the part of Legion which may take up a bit more time. But like I said, if you're really not interested, or if you don't want to spend that much time, there are other options available to you regarding the lore in Legion. But that is going to do it for today's video. I hope you found it both educational and informational. If there were any topics that I didn't cover in as much detail that you would have liked, or if you have any questions on topics that I didn't cover at all, leave me a comment in the section down below. I love getting comments from the community. I love just talking about the World of Warcraft more with community members. There's just so much in it that is really, really exciting to play through, and I love being able to talk about my experiences with other people and hear about what their experiences are as well. So let me know if there was something that you feel I could have covered a bit more in depth and you want some clarification on, or if you found something that I didn't cover at all, and you want to ask me a question on how PvP is, or how pet battles are, or what I really think of more in-depth in raiding. I didn't go too in-depth in this video. I wanted to make this more of a general, more accessible video that both new players and older players could really relate to. But like I said, I love hearing from the community, so let me know if you have any questions at all. If you like this video, then of course give it a thumbs up, and if you like my channel, you like the types of videos I make, then of course feel free to subscribe. But with that being said, I hope to see you guys in the next video. See you later!